In war and battle, Socrates, this is the way to do your part. Socrates. Oh my, did we show up too late? After the feast, as they say? Callicles. And very much of a stylish feast at that, because Gorgias laid out a display of many beautiful things for us just a little while ago. Well, Callicles, Chaerephon here is to blame for that, since he made us waste our time in the marketplace. Chaerephon. It's no big thing, Socrates, since I'll provide the cure too, because Gorgias is a friend of mine. So he'll put on a display for us now, if that seems good, or some other time if you want. Callicles. What, Chaerephon? Does Socrates have a desire to hear Gorgias? Chaerephon responds, That's the very thing we're here for, in fact. Callicles replies, Then come to my place whenever you want, because Gorgias is stopping off with me, and he'll give a display for you. Socrates responds, That's good of you to say, Callicles, but would he be willing to have a conversation with us? Because I want to find out from him what power belongs to the man's art, and what it is that he lays claim to and teaches. As for the other thing, the display, let him do that some other time, as you said. Callicles says there's nothing like asking the man himself. Let me pause there. This is Plato's Gorgias, some of the opening lines. Now, Plato is known for only having written dialogues in the form of dialogues. His own voice is often only present in the title of the dialogue, which already complicates the assumption that we can say this is Plato's metaphysics, whatever we might think that that means, or this is Plato's idea about something, because there's already this distance in his chosen form of writing. It's always good to remember that. So, the other thing that this particular translator brings out in an ambiguous way, something that he says may or may not be significant, is that this figure of Callicles, who gives us the opening words of the dialogue, who is not paired as the other two are. So there's Socrates and Chaerephon. Chaerephon makes them late because they're at the market, but Chaerephon is a friend or student, you could say, of Socrates. Then there's Gorgias, this the equivalent to our today's public intellectual or something of this kind. And Gorgias has a student of sorts, Polus. So there's the two sets of them, and then this fifth character, who's unknown outside of this dialogue. So it's possible that he's a fictional character, or that he was a young Athenian at the time within the political space, and we just know nothing more of him. What this translator brings in that's curious is he says, Callicles' name, which means famed for visible excellence, or I think that the kal is close to the Greek for beautiful, so that's this visible aspect part of it. So visible excellence is close, or it resembles Plato's given name. So Plato is the nickname picked up by Plato, but his given name was Aristocles, which means something like famed for highest excellence or best reputation. So what may or may not be significant is, it seems to be what this translator is implying, is whether Callicles is functioning in some way as this outlet for Plato's self. Maybe I'm proposing that, or I'm suggesting, or I'm taking up the implication. But remembering that it's ambiguous, I'm not making a final claim on that, and it will be curious to see how it pans out later. As far as I can tell at the moment, and this is jumping ahead, so please excuse me, there is something that happens in the dialogue where Callicles comes to be a good conversation partner for and with Socrates because he's willing to say what he really thinks, which is opposed to the norm where that's what makes the dialogue possible. That's why Socrates says you are uh, uh, that engagement can further our dialogue, um, as opposed to the, I guess, more usual situation where one does not say what one actually thinks, but says, uh, perhaps you could say what one should say. So um, I think this comes out kind of in the idea that, um, let me stop there. Okay, so why am I doing this? This is a commitment to produce these summaries, reflections on portions of the text for a few reasons. Um, One of the reasons would be a good exercise is fantastic text. A set of us that, if you are familiar with this channel, you may remember a reading group done on Aristotle's Politics. A group of us came together to read Aristotle's Politics. We went through book one. That same group of friends who each at least attempted to write uh, write and study under Laurence Bloom, who joins us, um, are gathered. Thomas has gathered us this time with the cause of going through the Gorgias, and for that reason, he will be leading us. So, at the time of that dialogue, if you listened in with us, which would be a select few of you, the Sipo was about to become a dad. He has since become a dad. That means Avuyile is very busy mothering, so she will not be joining us for this reading and study. So part of the reason for these notes is to produce something to share with Avuyile so we can keep her up with what we are moving through. And an invitation to you, Avuyile, is if you see us missing something, your intervention would be greatly appreciated. Okay, then part of the reason for recording, say, the reading group on Aristotle's Politics was this sense that this manner of philosophy, um, which we get the first clue of from the fact that Plato chose to write dialogues. There's a communication in the form that he elected, that he's pointing to a particular activity. He could have written, for example, a treatise or something else, but he chose to write a dialogue, which for us is this pointing to this activity of philosophy. And part of that is the one way to point at it is to say that what happens in the interpersonal dynamics in philosophy is very much part of the philosophy that is um, uh, intensely important to whatever content gets unfolded. So we have this unique affordance with our information technologies, with Zoom and YouTube, such that we can connect from across the world. We can have conversations. We can have recorded conversations that can then be shared and listened in on by others. This is a new medium condition whose benefit we are probably only just beginning to see, and that is probably very worthwhile leaning into. At the same time, it's probably good from time to time to return to a master of the craft. So rather than recording the process itself, I will be taking the opportunity here to reflect back on the text itself, and our process will be unrecorded and private. Perhaps towards the end of our process together, there would be cause for or a display of dialogue. Maybe I'm putting that out there. I'm happy for feedback, and let me say as well, because I'm doing this as an exercise of study and learning in itself, I really do invite your feedback and comments about things that perhaps I haven't seen, that you feel relevant to include, that you would want to ask about, disagree around or on, etc. Please do so. You can use the comments or send me a pigeon. So we'll be moving through the text in small chunks. This time I'm going to move through the content of what we moved through in our first session, what we plan to move through in our first session, and I think that's very much maybe excessive introductory notes. So let's start at the beginning. Just to say that, to report on, say, the experience of, or the phenomenology of, reading a Platonic dialogue. I was introduced to Plato through Larry in 2017. I think the first text we did was the Symposium. And it's only something that increases to be the case, is that the mastery or the skill of this figure of Socrates just grows in its significance. There's a general principle that we encourage to have where there's a contradiction should be related to as a summoner. It should summon attention, or one would be wise to let it summon one's attention, which comes to a phenomena that is cause for and involved in the very naming of this channel, holy cow, this phenomena of a whole, which this first line of the text was and is in the experience of reading it. Obviously, you want to get going very quickly, or you want to move through the text, you want to see where it goes. But it was very peculiar and perplexing, this beginning of the text. This is how it starts. Now, I'm giving you this information. It's only information that I realized this morning. But Callicles is greeting Socrates, who is arriving late. And he's saying, and this is the first line of the text, "In war and battle, Socrates, this is the way to do your part," they say. Socrates replies, "Oh my, did we show up too late? After the feast, as the saying goes." Okay, so just these two lines. In war and battle, Socrates, this is how to do your part. So the information that we then get from Socrates is that they're showing up late. So there's something about doing your part in war and battle that is showing up late. Why is showing up late to battle and war doing one's part is a question. And then why does Socrates call a feast what Callicles called a war and a battle? Those are two different kinds of activities, but there's this bringing together in the way that they're exchanging here. So why is showing up late to a battle doing your part? We have just generally these two activities. We have a war and a battle, and then we have a feast. A war or a battle is an activity in which there is a consequence or an end. So it is towards something, the battling teams, and there's a winner. That is the result of the activity. Where a feast is a different kind of activity in that it is good for itself, in that the eating is this self-contained good. So it doesn't make sense to show up late for a feast. because then the best is gone, the food is gone. Showing up, because the end of the activity is in the activity itself. In a war and a battle, the end is at the end of the activity. It is for some consequence or end. There's just something that occurred to me in that in a feast, you maybe have the best first. In a war and a battle, it might be the case that the best are left at the end. So to do one's part is to come for the end where the best are left. Just putting that out. Okay, so Callicles responds to Socrates, and very much of a stylish feast at that. So he supplicates to Socrates' concept of what it is. It's not a war or battle, it's a feast. And he says, oh, it was a stylish feast, yes, but Gorgias laid out a display of many beautiful things for us just a little while ago. Socrates says to Callicles that Chaerephon is to be blamed because he was wasting time in the marketplace. This is a play that will come out later. I think someone proposes later that philosophy is stupid and Socrates is childlike, and the place where philosophy is good when you're young, maybe it's like what is that? Cut your teeth on. But then the man should be made in the marketplace. The marketplace is where the man is to be made. At the beginning here, Socrates is saying Chaerephon was making us waste our time in the marketplace. The marketplace was a waste of time. We're coming to the non-waste, maybe. Okay, that's just the point now. This is a lot further on in the dialogue, but also just at the beginning, gesturing towards the, I don't know how else to say it other than kind of woven, that there's a potential in these texts that can be almost infinitely mined. I don't want to be too infinite or many beautiful things, because this very dynamic will come out. But it's just to say that there's a lot of play involved, and a lot of the communication happens in the play. Okay. So I will now appear to move on quite speedily, covering content and key moments, some of the key moments at least, different times when different speakers come in, when questions are asked, positions are stated. So as not to produce too long a rambling or a reflection, I think at least for this video, I've done something of an extended introduction because it's getting going. I could go on for a lot longer as to how even to approach a text. Yeah, I think it's very messy at the beginning. You might, and I just handling paint, or it's just a funny example of trying to get a grip on the beginning. It's very important to get a grip at the beginning because that really informs the movement that follows. So, not to rehash too much, but there's these different kinds of activities. One that's good in itself, one that is good for something else, that there's a way to do your part. And something about doing your part is showing up late. In what activity is it good to show up late for? It would seem to be the one whose end arrives at the end of it, was displaced from it. Okay, so Chaerephon suggests that he'll provide the cure for having caused them to be late at the marketplace, and he says that because Gorgias is a friend of his, he'll put on a display for us. now or some other time. Callicles responds, says, what, Chaerephon, does Socrates desire to hear Gorgias? And Chaerephon says, yes, that's the very reason why we're here, in fact. Callicles then says, well, come over to my place because Gorgias is there, stopping off with me, and he'll give a display for you. Socrates responds and says, that's very good of you to say, Callicles, but would he be willing to have a conversation with us? Because I want to find out from him what power belongs to the man's art and what it is that he lays claim to and teaches. As for the other thing, the display, let him do that some other time, as you say. Callicles says there's nothing like asking the man himself, Socrates, because this too was part of the display. At any rate, he was just now urging any of the people inside to ask whatever they might want and saying he had given an answer on every subject. So there's apparently a simple distinction made. There's this kind of activity that's a display. I display a concept or an idea, or I show you many beautiful things. And that might seem to be contrasted with the activity of philosophy, which would be conversation, this back and forth, asking and answering. But immediately then, we are made known that Gorgias is also a master at this, at asking whatever is asked of him. Socrates says, beautiful Chaerephon, you ask him. Chaerephon asks Socrates, what am I going to ask him? Socrates wants to know who he is. What do you mean, Socrates? The same way, if he happened to be a craftsman who made shoes, he'd presumably answer you that he's a leather worker. Or don't you understand how I mean it? Chaerephon says, I do understand, and I'll ask him. Tell me, Gorgias, is Callicles here telling the truth, that you claim to answer whatever anyone asks you? It's true. It's true, Chaerephon. I was just now making that very claim. And for many years, no one has ever asked me anything new. Then I suppose you give your answers with ease, Gorgias. It's open to you to put to the test, Chaerephon. And now we get an interruption from Polus, who is an understudy of Gorgias. And I just have to include here in our conversation. Sipo has read the Meno quite a number of times. In fact, the first series of conversations that was on this channel, we were gathered around the question, can virtue be taught? And we were supported by the Protagoras and the Meno. We weren't really doing a reading. We were being informed by, and then kind of letting our conversation go where it would go. Something noted by Larry in our last meeting was just a curiosity, and now this is just speculating about characters in the dialogue and the drama, and also individual sense of the individuals. Once, okay, it doesn't seem that Socrates and Gorgias hate each other, so to speak. They seem to quite like each other, actually. Gorgias can appear very full of himself, as it would be said. But one thing to notice is that Gorgias's students tend to be, I think the word that was used is assholes. So this is now I've been expressing this badly because I'm not sure about pre-setting it for you or coloring it for you that you should think about Polus as an asshole. But here he is interrupting, and this is the first time that we hear of him in the dialogue. If that's what you want, Chaerephon, test me, by Zeus. Gorgias seems to be worn out, since he's just gone through a lot of answers. Chaerephon responds, what, Polus? Do you suppose you'd give answers more beautifully than Gorgias would? What does it matter to you, as long as I answer well enough? Chaerephon says it doesn't. So let me then ask you. Um, and he asks, I'm asking, if Gorgias happened to be knowledgeable in the same art his brother Herodicus is, what would we justly name him? Wouldn't it be the same as that one? Certainly. Therefore, we would speak beautifully in declaring him to be a doctor. Yes, says Polus. Chaerephon then says, but if he were experienced in the same art as Aristophon, the son of Aglaphon, or his brother, what would we rightly call him? Polus says, a painter, obviously. Chaerephon answers, but as it is, since he's knowledgeable in some art, by calling him what would we be calling him rightly? Polus then responds, there are many arts among human beings, Chaerephon, that have been discovered experientially from experiences. I can't tell if the author meant experientially from experiences. For experiences makes our lifespan pass along the path of art, but inexperience along the path of chance. And of the sorts of arts, various people partake of various ones in various ways, the best partaking of the best. Gorgias here is one of these and partakes of the most beautiful of the arts. So I see this play of like the best and the third line, the second thing that Callicles says in the entire dialogue, and after responding to Socrates calling the battle a feast, and then he says, very much a stylish feast at that, because Gorgias laid out a beautiful display of many beautiful things for us just a little while ago. So Socrates now interrupts, and he says, Polus appears to be beautifully prepared for speeches, Gorgias, but he's not doing what he promised Chaerephon. So now Socrates is addressing Gorgias. Gorgias responds, what's that, Socrates? Socrates says, because he doesn't appear to me to be answering what was asked at all. So Gorgias then says, okay, now Socrates, then you ask Polus, not Chaerephon anymore. Socrates, not if it's possible that you yourself want to answer. It would be much pleasanter to ask you instead, because it's clear to me, even from what he said, that Polus has taken more care over what's called rhetoric than over engaging in conversation. How's that, Socrates? Polus asks. Because, Polus, when Chaerephon asked what art Gorgias is knowledgeable in, you praised his art as though someone was blaming it, but you didn't answer what it is. Polus, well, didn't I answer that it was the most beautiful one? Socrates responds, you sure did, but no one asked what sort of thing Gorgias's art might be, but what it is, and what one ought to call Gorgias. The same way Chaerephon set out examples for you before, and you answered him beautifully and with few words. Now too say in that way what the art is and what we should call Gorgias. Or rather, Gorgias, tell us yourself what we should call you for being knowledgeable in what art? And Gorgias responds, rhetoric, Socrates. Then we should call you a rhetorician? A rhetorician? Gorgias responds, a good one too, Socrates. And if you want to call me what I flaunt myself to be, as Homer says. Socrates, I do want to. Then Gorgias responds, then call me that. And shall we say that you're capable of making others rhetoricians too? I just wanted to point to another detail as well, that we can, and I did imply in the beginning that reading the Platonic dialogues and studying someone who is a master of the craft or the art, the dialogue contains the question of what the craft is exactly. But in this case, we're looking at Socrates and the practice of philosophy and his understudy of Chaerephon. And his understudy is Chaerephon, is just to notice dramatically the way that Chaerephon presents his question to Polus. He sets up the examples first, saying like, if Gorgias happened to be knowledgeable in the same art as his brother Herodicus, his brother's a doctor, then we would call him a doctor as well. Yes. Then a second example of the same form. Or if he was knowledgeable in painting, we would call him a painter. Yes. Okay. So he's knowledgeable in some art by calling him what would we call him rightly? So who is he? What is he doing? And that's when Polus answers, oh, the most beautiful, the best of arts. Yeah, there are all sorts of arts. There are arts that are discovered experientially from experiences, and the arts of inexperience pass along the path of chance. Okay, but he's not answering the question. What is he? Gorgias gives the answer at this point by 449a. Rhetoric, Socrates. Okay, so call me that, a rhetorician. And shall we say that you're capable of making other rhetoricians too? I make that exact claim, not only here, but also in other places. Socrates then says, would you be willing, Gorgias, to go on conversing the way we are now? One asking questions and the other answering, and put off to another time this length of speeches that Polus started? Yes, okay, just a paragraph that Polus gave. But don't make a lie out of what you're promising. Just be willing to answer what's asked with one short reply at a time. This restraint. Gorgias. There are some answers, Socrates, that are necessarily made with long speeches, but still I'll try and be as brief as possible. Because even in this, this also one of the things I claim, that no one can say the same things in fewer words than I. Okay, very full. Yeah, that's what's needed, Socrates. That's what's needed, Gorgias. Make a display for me of this. This make a display. Yes, Socrates is like feeding this, like encouraging Gorgias. Yes, I want a display of this very thing. Brief talk, and we'll leave the other thing for later. Sometimes Socrates gets this kind of thing, like coy, or there's an irony, an apparent irony at play. Yeah, that's just what I'll do, and you'll say you've never heard no briefer talker. Then let's get to it. You claim you're knowledgeable in the art of rhetoric, and could make another person a rhetorician too. What exactly, among the things there are, is rhetoric about? The same way weaving is about clothworking, isn't it? Yes. And music is about tune making? Yes. By hero, Gorgias, I marvel at your answers. The way you answer in the fewest words possible. Yes, Socrates, I guess I do a pretty fair job at that. You put it well. Come then, and tell me about rhetoric the same way. Which of the things there are is it a knowledge of? Of speeches. Speeches. The place of speech. This is part of my own deep interest in the text and the desire to have come to it. So I'm very appreciative of my friends for this opportunity to study it. And I just want to tag this. There is this affordance that we have where a Zoom account. I don't have mine at the moment, but a Zoom account and a YouTube, and you can record these conversations and share them. It's incredible. What is the place and the function of speech? What is speech? There's many in various different traditions. There's this intense respect for the word, for speech. What is it? Okay, Gorgias, of speeches. What sort of them, Gorgias? The ones that point out to sick people how to lead their lives so that they become healthy? No. So rhetoric isn't about all speeches. No, indeed. But it does make people capable of speaking. Yes. So does it also make them have sound judgments about the things that they're speaking of? How could it not? Well, does the medical art that was just now mentioned make people capable of having sound judgments and speaking about sick people? Necessarily. So it looks like the medical art is also about speeches. Yes. The ones that have to do with diseases, especially those. And so the art of gymnastic training is also about speeches, the ones having to do with good and bad condition in bodies. Quite so. And surely, Gorgias, the rest of the arts are the same way. Each of them is about just those speeches that have to do with the subject matter concerning which it is the art. So it appears. So why in the world don't you call the rest of the arts rhetorical, since they're about speeches, if indeed you call the art which is about speeches rhetoric? Because, Socrates, all the knowledge involved in the rest of the arts, one may say, is about handicrafts and actions of that sort, while in rhetoric there's no such work of handicraft, but its whole action and exertion of mastery are by means of speeches. Sorry. For these reasons, I hold that the art of rhetoric, rightly speaking, is about speeches, as I claim. But am I understanding what sort of art you want to call it then? Maybe I'll get to know it more clearly. Just answer me this. We have arts, right? Yes. Among all the arts, I suppose the major part of some of them consists of working and they need little speech. Some of them none speech. None. No speech. The handicrafts. But what pertains to the art could be accomplished even in silence, as with painting and sculpture and many others. It's arts such as these that you seem to me to be speaking of, as those you claim rhetoric has no concern with. Isn't that it? You draw the inference quite beautifully, Socrates. But there are others among the arts that accomplish everything by means of speech, and have, one may say, either no additional need of work or very little, such as arithmetic, the study of numerical ratios, geometry, and even checkers, as well as many other arts, of which some have the speeches about equal in number to the actions, while many have more speeches, and with them absolutely all the action and exertion of mastery are by means of speeches. You seem to me to be saying that rhetoric is one of the arts of this kind. So, rhetoric seems to be one of these arts in which all of its mastery is expressed through speech. There is no part of the art that requires or does not require speech. And Socrates puts that in a wider category, say like arithmetic. He also said checkers, geometry, um, which just for reference, because I mean this didn't track exactly for me into my own schooling experience, um, because we used the visible images of mathematics. But an example would be, uh, I think it's the Meno, but please correct me. Um, the Meno where Socrates through dialogue um, questions a young slave boy, and the slave boy demonstrates a knowledge of mathematics through the dialogue, through dialogue. That's serving its own purpose in that dialogue, but it's just to say that this um, the study of numerical ratios, of the odd and the even, of the geometry, uh, arithmetic, um, are arts that are at least way more speech mastered than making a chair, doing a painting, cooking food, healing people, teaching boxing. Okay, what you say is true. Socrates. But I don't suppose you want to call any of those rhetoric, even though you said it that way in your wording. That the art that has its exertion of mastery by means of speeches is rhetoric. And if someone wanted to be picky about your speeches, he might come back with, therefore, Gorgias, you're saying arithmetic is rhetoric. The implication of what he said. But I don't suppose you mean either arithmetic or geometry is rhetoric. Your supposition is right, Socrates, and your comeback is just. Come on now, you two finish off the answer to what I asked. Since rhetoric happens to be one among those arts that use speech for the most part, while others also happen to be of that sort, try to tell me what it is about which rhetoric has its exertion of mastery in words. It's the same as if someone were to ask me about any one of the arts, whatever that we were just now speaking of. What is the art of arithmetic, Socrates? I'll tell him, just the way you did, just now, that it's one of the arts that have the exertion of mastery by means of speech. And if you were to go on and ask me, the one among them that's about what? I'll tell him that it's the one among them that's about the even and the odd, and exactly how much each is. And if you were to ask in turn, what art do you call the study of numerical ratios? I'll tell him that this is one of those that exert all their mastery through speech. And if he were to go on and ask me, the one about what? I'll tell him, like people drafting a motion in the assembly, that whereas in other respects the study of numerical ratios corresponds to the art of arithmetic, since they're about the same thing, the even and the odd, they differ to this extent that the study of numerical ratios studies the way the odd and the even are related to themselves and to one another in multitude. And if someone were to ask about astronomy, and if when I said that too exerts its mastery in all respects by speech, he were to say, what are the speeches of astronomy about, Socrates? I'll tell him that they're about the way the motions of the stars and the sun and the moon are related to one another in speed. Okay, this is a very interesting passage. This is 451 A to D. And what stuck out to me the first time was that this is a long speech from Socrates. This is what he appeared to be denouncing just a few moments ago. He then supplies a long speech, but in that speech, he models a back and forth. He models a dialogue. He's like, if someone were to ask me, then I would say, and then he recapitulates this questioning process and giving examples, many examples. There's this repetition in the form of the examples, and really laying out or drawing out this idea. A similar thing that Chaerephon was doing when he began questioning Polus. He gave examples for like setting up a space in which he could then ask the question, because Polus is a very simple answer to, if he studies medicine, we'll call him a doctor. If he paints, we call him a painter. Then sets up the question for, okay, so Gorgias is practicing a certain art. What is that art? What shall we call him that would be calling him rightly? Okay. There's also the opportunity of a steering that can happen when Socrates does this, when he goes into this speech. But let's move on. Hoping to get back to that point. Is Socrates steering? Maybe that's a question to have with the text. Where could he be steering to? Okay. And you'd be quite right saying it, Socrates. There, okay, you come on then to Gorgias. Rhetoric is precisely one of the arts that accomplish everything and exert all their mastery by speech, isn't it? So the thing that Socrates has just demonstrated or modeled, he now in 451D is inviting Gorgias into. Rhetoric is one of these arts that accomplish everything and exert all their mastery by speech, isn't it? And then Gorgias, the place that Socrates was playing for himself in his previous response, Gorgias is now playing. That is it. That it is. So tell me, the one among them that's about what? What is it among the things they are that these speeches that rhetoric employs are about? The greatest of human concerns, Socrates, and the best. But Gorgias, even in this, you're saying something open to dispute. And it's still not clear at all. I imagine you've heard people at drinking parties singing that round song in which they count them off, singing that having your health is best, being beautiful second best and third best, according to the composer of the round, being rich without being crooked. The third best is being rich without being crooked. So we have health, beauty, and wealth. I've heard it, but what's your point in saying this? Socrates says that if the craftsman responsible for these things the poet praises in the round song, we're standing here right now, a doctor, a trainer, a businessman. The doctor might say first, Socrates, Gorgias is fooling you because his art isn't about the greatest good for human beings. Mine is. If I were then to ask him, who are you to say so? He would probably say that he's a doctor. And what are you saying? That the work of your art is the greatest good? He would probably reply, how could it not be, Socrates? It's health. What greater good is there for human beings than health? And if after him the trainer in turn were to say, I'd be surprised myself as well, Socrates, if Gorgias has a greater good to show you from his art than I have from mine. I'd say back to him too, and who are you, fellow? What's your job? A trainer. He'd reply, and my job is to make human beings beautiful and strong in body. And after the trainer, the businessman would speak, having complete disdain for everyone. Just consider, Socrates, whether anything that's a greater good than wealth shows itself to you, around either Gorgias or anyone else at all. We'd say to him, what, are you a craftsman responsible for that? He would say, so. Uh, Who are you? A businessman. What? We would say, do you judge wealth to be the greatest good for human beings? How could it be otherwise? He would reply. And yet Gorgias here contends that the art at his disposal is a cause of a greater good than yours. Health, beauty, wealth. We would say, it's obvious that after that he would reply, and what is this good? Let Gorgias answer. So come on, Gorgias. Make believe you've been asked by them and by me, and answer what this is that you claim is the greatest good for human beings, and claim that you're a craftsman of. Again, this is a long speech by Socrates, a recapitulation, a training or modeling or displaying even of the beginning of conversation, of discussion. Okay. Then Gorgias responds, it's the very thing that is in truth the greatest good, Socrates. And the thing that's responsible for not only for being free for human beings themselves, but also for their ruling others, each in his own city. Sorry, I read that badly. It's the greatest good, in truth, Socrates. And the thing that's responsible not only for being free for human beings themselves, but also for their ruling others. So what are you saying that is? I'm saying it's being able to persuade people by speeches. Jurors in a law court, legislators in a council chamber, and those assembled in a deliberative assembly, and in every other gathering, whatever civic gathering may occur. And in fact, with this power, you'll have the doctor as a slave, and the trainer as a slave, and that businessman will be shown up as doing business for someone else and not for himself, namely for you, the one with the power to speak and persuade the multitudes. Now, Gorgias, you seem to me to have come closest to revealing rhetoric for the sort of art you take it to be. And if I'm understanding at all, you're saying that rhetoric is a crafter of persuasion, and the whole concern and sum total of it ends with that. Or do you have anything further to say that rhetoric has the power to do, beyond producing in its hearers persuasion in the soul? We'll conclude there for now. I thought it was going to be a 20-minute attempt at a summary, but I think I'm going to keep going on in this way, reading and commenting. Please, if you have any feedback, let me know anything that was helpful or not helpful. I will just go on in this way, I think, through the process. The text itself is very valuable. This is an opportunity for you to read and listen. I think that's that. I think that's good. This next week we have the next portion of text to read, and I'll be back with a summary and reading following that. So, okay, that's what I'll be doing. I'll be reading, commenting, and including some comments on the process that we are moving through. I guess what I lose by including all the content is some of the cutting a bit closer to the key moments, the key distinctions, the categories. But it's really this play of I'm not sure when I'm including too much, or so I guess I will keep reading in this manner. Thank you for your time and attention. I hope this in some way was interesting or would serve you. And please don't be shy to drop a comment or disagree or ciao.